If anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, yes, and even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. You know, I was really hoping that I'd get an easier passage to preach from this Sunday. Didn't happen. This is one of the hard teachings of Jesus. And Scripture is very clear. You know, some passages, some of Jesus' hard teachings, he directs at his apostles. And some others, or the Pharisees. This one, it's very clear that he turned and he spoke to a great crowd. So this is for everybody. This is for you and me. It's not just for the bishops. It's not just for the priests. It's not just for the consecrated religious. It's for us. And the bottom line is this. Jesus is telling us that Christian discipleship costs something. In fact, it costs a great deal. And it's not enough anymore just to be a cultural Catholic. Now, we all know the divine mercy image, right? That's that image right there. Jesus, I trust in you. Jesus gave that image in a revelation to Saint Faustina Kowalski in Poland in February of 1931. I mention this because just 2 weeks ago, my wife Reggie and I were in Poland on a pilgrimage. We went to the Basilica of the Divine Mercy, heard the whole story of St. Faustina. The Basilica of Divine Mercy is right next to the convent that St. Faustina spent the last years of her life in. And at the Basilica, there's a museum in which they've reconstructed the monastic cell that St. Faustina, that would have been the monastic cell that St. Faustina lived in the last years of her life. Now, it was very simple, as you might expect. It was a bed, a desk, a crucifix, a lamp, maybe a dresser. That's about it. But something struck me hard when I was there, because in that room, they'd also set up a glass display case. And in that glass display case, they had some of the objects that were St. Faustina's possessions. And you know what they were? In that display case, there were a couple of flails. There was a hair belt. There was a belt of thorns, a bracelet of thorns, and a cross of thorns. Now, the flails, they're cords about 2.5 feet long that's knotted at the end, a series of knots, and they're used for self-flagellation, right? The hair belt is this big, huge, it looks like one of those World Wrestling Foundation belts that they wear, the huge, it's like this big, and it goes all around your whole waist. And it's made out of what looks like the coarsest horsehair you've ever seen, or even the frayed fibers, hemp fibers of an old frayed rope. Now, the belt of nails, the belt of thorns, the bracelet of thorns, and the cross of thorns, those aren't even made out of thorns, they're made out of wire. And it's wire that's woven, and it's woven in such a way that the ends of the wire are turned inward towards the flesh, towards the body. And you wear that, and it's like you're wearing needles all day long. And that's what St. Faustina had in her possession. Those were her tools. Those were are called disciplines that she used to mortify herself, to give herself extra suffering. St. Faustina willingly gave herself extra suffering, as if illness, she died of tuberculosis at age 33. And most of her consecrated life, she was ill. So as if her illness, as if fasting and praying 7 times a day and her poverty and her obedience were not enough of a trial for her. She added all that other stuff. Now that is hardcore discipleship. And many other great saints were known to use such disciplines too. Saint Teresa of Avila, Saint Thomas More, Saints Jacinta and Francisco of Fatima, and they were children, by the way. Saint Dominic, Saint Francis, Saint Catherine of Siena, Saint Ignatius, more and more. The list is long of saints who did this. Now, I'm not suggesting that I'm going to go to Father Ed and say, hey, let's order 300 hair shirts on Amazon.com. I don't even think Amazon.com has hair shirts or even knows what a hair shirt is. But maybe I'm wrong. But the point I am making is that all these saints understood that following Jesus costs something, and it's meant to cost something. It's not an easy path. It's not enough to be a part-time Christian or a 30% Christian or a fair-weather Christian. In my Protestant days, there was a whole class of people that we used to call creasters. You know what a creaster is? They came on Christmas and Easter. They were creasters, right? Instead, we need to be all-out Christians, hardcore Christians. We need to be like Paul. Listen to what Paul wrote. Paul wrote, "Do you not know that in a race all the runners compete, but only one receives a prize? Run, therefore, that you may obtain the prize. Every athlete exercises self-control in all things. They do it to receive a perishable wreath, but we, an imperishable wreath. Well, I do not run aimlessly. I do not box as one beating the air, but I pommel my body and subdue it, lest after preaching to others, I myself should be disqualified." We all want that perishable wreath, don't we? We all want to be saints. In fact, in the gospel today, Jesus went even further when he said, "If anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, he cannot be my disciple." Now, that needs some explaining. Is Jesus really asking us to hate our parents and our siblings and our children? No, that's called Semitic hyperbole. That's actually a literary form, and it's exaggeration to make a point. But the point he's making is, he's saying in effect, you know how much you love your parents and your children? You'd die for them, wouldn't you? Well, you need to love me even more. It means total commitment to God, commitment above every other commitment. That's the cost of discipleship. And I believe that this call to carry our crosses and to love Jesus even more than our own lives is particularly important for Catholics today, for us. That's because almost everything in our culture today is antagonistic to Catholic values. Our culture teaches that emotion is more important than reason, that happiness is a right, not a blessing or a gift, And that freedom means that we can define our own reality any way we want it to be, even if that defies biology. None of these notions is consistent with truth, with natural law, or with Catholic teaching. Yet any disagreement with this narrative is punishable by the PC police. And I know you know what I mean. You know, the last time you might have stood up for your Catholic values, it was hard, wasn't it? It's only going to get harder. This sort of attitude in the world puts every ordinary faithful Catholic at odds with the prevailing culture. That's you and me, that's all of us. Meanwhile, opposition to the Catholic Church is increasing in extent and intensity. Wouldn't it be great if we could just raise our kids, just pursue our careers, just enjoy being at our church and worshiping, and be left alone? Yes, it would. But I don't think that's an option anymore. Or it's increasingly not an option anymore. Leon Trotsky famously said, "Maybe you are not interested in war, but war is interested in you." And we Catholics need to realize that war is upon us. It's not a military war. We don't take up arms. That's not how we fight. It's a cultural and it's a spiritual war. We're in a spiritual battle against worldly forces that hate God and would destroy the church. And all of us, every day in our lives, are on the front lines. The battleground is religious freedom and life and family. And that's because, especially life and family, because life and family are the areas in which Catholics cooperate most closely with God in the creative process, in His creation and formation of new souls. So, Catholic families, what you do is radical and important and essential to the Catholic Church. Sister Lucia, in a letter to the late Cardinal Caffarra, once wrote, "Father, a time will come when the decisive battle between the kingdom of Christ and Satan will be over marriage and family. And those who will work for the good of the family will experience persecution and tribulation. But do not be afraid, because Our Lady has already crushed Satan's head." Shortly before his death in 2017, Cardinal Caffarra said he believed that decisive battle has already begun. And I feel like it has. And I know I'm not alone. So, brothers and sisters, we need to get ready. We need to remember that this is a supernatural battle that we're in. And it's the fate of souls. Our souls and the souls of everyone we love is at stake. And therefore, it is perfectly appropriate for Jesus to look at us and say, unless you love me more than your mothers and fathers and siblings and children, unless you love me more than that, you can't be my disciple. Because in circumstances like they are today, we have to love him more. We have to love Jesus and his church and his cause even more than we love our mother and fathers and brothers and children, even more than our very lives. The future of the church depends on it. So, in conclusion, at the Catholic Men's Conference in March, Catholic apologist Steve Ray began his talk by saying, "Fathers, raise your children to be martyrs. Not because we want them to die, but because we want them to understand that there are some things worth dying for." Our faith is worth dying for. That has been proved over and over and over again for 2,000 years by a long list of saints. Jesus is worth dying for. And in many parts of the world, Christians are literally dying for their faith. That's not true in the United States. Not yet. But already we know Christians are subject to ridicule, shame, ostracism, and in some cases even loss of job and livelihood. So we need to step up our discipleship. We need to be 100% Christians. Hardcore Christians. St. Faustina type Christians. Because Christian discipleship has a cost, and all of us need to be preparing ourselves spiritually and mentally to pay that cost in the coming days. Because God put each one of us on this earth at this time to do battle for his kingdom. Let's end now by joining together, praying to St. Michael the Archangel. St. Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle. Be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, O Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, thrust into hell Satan and all evil spirits who wander through the world seeking the ruin of souls.